So guys, going forward, now we will try to understand that what exactly routing table is. Why do we need routing table and how does routing table helps in layer 3 routing? So we will try to understand the concept of routing table with the help of a simple example. So let us take the example of our own topology which contains 3 L3 routers. So on the right hand side you can see that we have a very simple topology in which there are 3 routers called VM, VM1 and VM2. You can see that there is a direct link between the router VM and router VM1, right? So the network ID of this point-to-point link is 192.168.4.0/24. So let us call this point-to-point subnet as subnet 1. Similarly, there is a point-to-point link between the router VM1 and router VM2. And the point-to-point link between the router VM1 and VM2 is configured under subnet 192.168.1.0/24. And let us call this point-to-point subnet as subnet 2. Right? So now we have already discussed that what are local subnet and remote subnets. So now I ask you one question, right? What are the local subnet for router VM? The answer is simple. The local subnet for router VM is subnet 1, right? Similarly, if I ask you question that what are the local subnet with respect to router VM2? The answer is simple. The local subnet with respect to router VM2 is subnet 2, right? Now again I ask you question that what are the local subnet with respect to router VM1? So just apply the basic definitions that we have already discussed. The local subnets with respect to the router VM1 is both subnet 1 and subnet 2, right? The reason being that the router VM1 has an interface Ethernet 2 which is configured with an IP address which falls in subnet 1. Therefore, subnet 1 is a local subnet for router VM1, right? And similarly, subnet 2 is a local subnet with respect to router VM1 because router VM1 has a local interface Ethernet 3 which is configured with an IP address which is a member of subnet 2. Right? So nothing new, just apply the basics regarding how to find a subnet as local subnet or remote subnet with respect to a given router. Right? So now going forward, are you able to ping from router VM to IP address 192.168.4.1? So you are on router VM. If you open a terminal on router VM and if you try a ping command, that is ping and just specify the IP address. So are you able to ping the IP address 192.168.4.1, which is actually the IP address of the other side of this point-to-point link? The answer is yes. You will always be able to ping your neighbor. So now what is the answer? Why are you able to ping the IP address 192.168.4.1 from the router VM? The answer is that from router VM you are trying to pinging an IP address which falls in the subnet 1, and subnet 1 is a local subnet with respect to router VM. So basically you are trying to pinging a machine which is in the same subnet as your source machine. So this is the case where both the communicating machines are present in the same subnet, and therefore layer 3 routing is not required at all. Similarly, are you able to ping from router VM1 to IP address 192.168.1.2? That is this IP address. So from router VM1, can you ping the IP address 192.168.1.2? The answer is yes. And the same logic applies. From router VM1, you are trying to ping an IP address which falls in the subnet 2, and subnet 2 is also a local subnet for router VM1. So this is also the case where you are trying to ping a machine which falls in the local subnet as your source machine. So this is the case where you are trying to ping a destination machine and that destination machine is in the same local subnet as the source machine. So only L2 routing is required to ping a neighbor which is present in the same subnet as source machine. right? So layer 3 routing is not required whenever you need to ping a neighbor. The ARP protocol alone is sufficient to ping a destination machine which is present in the same local subnet as a source machine, right? So now going forward, now if you try to ping an IP address 192.168.1.2, that is this IP address, or IP address 192.168.1.1 from router VM, that is from this router, can you try ping this IP address or this IP address? The answer is no, you cannot ping. Why you cannot ping? Because layer 3 routing is required in this case, because the IP address that you are trying to ping from router VM falls in the subnet 2, and subnet 2 is a remote subnet with respect to the router VM. So in order to ping any IP address which falls in the remote subnet with respect to the source router, you always need a layer 3 routing information. Similarly, from router VM2, you cannot ping an IP address 192.168.4.1, and neither you can ping an IP address 192.168.4.2 without configuring L3 routing, right? Because both these IP addresses are the member of subnet 1, and subnet 1 is a remote subnet with respect to router VM2. So going forward, directly connected peer interfaces can always be pinged, and to do so only ARP protocol is required, right? The virtual machine VM, that is this virtual machine, do not know how to reach remote subnet 192.168.1.0/24, which is subnet 2, right? And the same applies for VM2 also. VM2 doesn't know how to reach subnet 1, right? So VM2 do not know how to reach subnet, that is subnet 1. So if you do not recall what is remote subnet, just apply the definition of this remote subnet. A subnet S is said to be a remote subnet with respect to a router A if none of the local interfaces of router A has an IP address which is a member of subnet S. If this condition is satisfied, then the subnet S is a remote subnet for the router A. We have already discussed this concept of remote subnet and local subnet. Now let us try to understand the importance of layer 3 routing information with the help of another example. So you can see in this topology we have 5 routers, right? And the router on which we are trying to issue the ping command is router VM, right? So if VM needs to send data to the router VM4, that is this router, VM do not know where to send the packet, that is, should it send the packet towards the router VM1 or should it send the packet towards the router VM3, right? So if router VM wants to send a data to router VM4, we need to tell the router VM that in order to send data to router VM4, you should send the data towards router VM3 and not towards router VM1. It is our responsibility to feed this intelligence in the router, and this intelligence is called layer 3 routing information. So this intelligence is borne by layer 3 routing tables. So next we will learn how to configure routing tables on a router so that router can send data packet to other remote routers in the topology.